All right, I will call to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission, February 12th, 2019. The meeting is being both audio and video recorded. Are there any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, it is adopted. Any corrections or additions to the minutes of the June 14th meeting? Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. I would entertain a motion to ratify the warrants of January 23rd, 2019 and February 6th, 2019.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Public comment this time. Mr. Rafter, the pending leases and contracts.
We have one license agreement and one contract. The first is a license agreement with Form Bar Fitness, and that's the $1,500 business fee for a beach license, and they're formerly known as Go Figure Bar Studio, which was there in there last year. The second is a contract with Potter's Industry to supply glass beads for our markings, and it's a 3-year contract valued at $231,000.
Can you just go out and buy marbles?
A very specific type of beads.
Sorry. Any questions on these two proposed contracts and agreements?
I had one question
Yes, sir.
on the on beach. This is for down on the beach, correct?
Yes.
Is there hours? I think last year we had.
Last year we had put them in. I don't know if it's in the agreement this year.
I didn't see them. That was the only. Just because that beach is so busy midday,
Yeah.
and I think they were happy to work around it last year. I thought we said like
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
10
it's the
to
same.
4, 10 to 5,
Clarify that.
but as long as there's.
Well, might I suggest that if we sign it, the letter be written to them, the company, the signed agreement?
To clarify the hours.
Yeah, whatever the manager comes up with.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the license agreement with Form Bar Fitness and the contract with Potter's Industries?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Pending matters, a general fund repayment proposal.
On the
In-kind
general fund
services.
repayment, I had a discussion with the Director of Municipal Finance, and I'll be preparing a letter. I prepared a draft to the FAA requesting their approval of an agreement with the final number that they had taken out they had disallowed some costs that went beyond the 3-year look back. So we put it in with the new final number, which is, I believe, about $3.9 million, and be sending that to FAA for their execution. On the crew quarters, met with the town working group on the 23rd of January to review the potential synergies. They're working on a housing policy while we're going to be working on RFQ for design and layout and site plan. And their primary goal is constructing housing to consolidate their seasonal employees into one area, while ours is more of a single family housing project. So there's some differences in terms of what the actual project will be, but the housing policy, I think, would benefit us greatly. On the, also, which as the commissioners may have heard, something has come to light recently that there may be consideration of purchase of the Nantucket Inn, either for housing or affordable housing or employee housing. I think it's they're kind of doing some due diligence now to find out exactly what it is
But it has been approved to go on the warrant, is it not?
as a placeholder, I believe so, yes.
I asked Mr. Rafter to put this on the agenda because I wanted to see what people's reactions are.
Well, I had heard about this last week. And,
Not from the standpoint, I'm not asking you whether you think it's a good idea from the town standpoint. I'm asking from the airport standpoint.
I don't know how it would affect us at all, other than it would probably cut down on, pilots being able to stay right at the airport. I think that's probably a negative for the airport.
And
There-
TSA, I know,
yes, TSA.
they do their temporary housing there.
Do they?
Mhm.
But they do during the summertime?
Actually, year round. We found out today they have a couple of them in there year round.
Is there any provision to keep that going that way? Maybe we ought to talk to FinCom or the select board or something like that, just to make them aware of that situation.
I made the town manager aware of our concerns, both TSA and pilots, and she's aware of that. So again, I think they still don't know how it would be operated. We had a tour of the building today. There's a number of units or a number of buildings, and some lend themselves
14
to,
separate buildings.
yeah, some lend themselves to apartments, some lend themselves to dorm rooms. Others are general facilities. It's a very interesting layout. But I have made it known to the town manager our concern about pilots and TSA.
What was their reaction to that?
She understands and was well aware of it. Again, like she said, it's very early. They don't even have an idea. She said, parts of it might be concessioned out. It just was an offer, I think, that made itself available in short order, and they just want to be able to at least take advantage if they can.
Now, I don't know if we can consider this, but would the airport commission be interested in making some sort of financial contribution to this purchase, which would then give us a right to preserve our needs in that facility? I don't know if we want to talk about that or think
Well,
about that.
I think there are two levels of conversation. Perhaps one is whether we think it's a good idea at all, for there not to be a hotel there if we can possibly.
Right.
I mean, there's no guarantee, obviously, that there'll be a hotel. Then the second one is if we don't have a position, or even if we do on that higher level question, whether we, pursue the avenue you're suggesting.
I don't know if we could find financing to do that, and how much that would be. I think this is a $30 million ballpark number that the town's talking about. Our participation would be obviously.
Well, the broker
tiny.
who's selling it was talking about $30 million today. He's representing the seller, and obviously whether that's the final price remains to be seen. But there's also the question of the renovations that would be required to
Turn it into family
turn it
units.
into apartments.
Right.
And the estimate we've heard is that if it was all turned into family units, there would be about 30.
Right.
Although that's still being worked on.
Tony, my only thought on that is we would have to check to see if we can use airport revenue to do that. Because
Right.
it may be considered revenue diversion, depending upon it. If you recall, we went through a lot of hoops to get our housing approved.
Right.
So I'm not sure, but
Right.
Or could this fall under the banner of housing,
it's,
into something that we've already
yeah, but
researched?
that was on what we were talking about is on our property, and they deemed it aeronautical and said,
Right.
go ahead.
Right.
It may not be if we bought into that.
Right.
That wouldn't be.
But it might be a solution too, so.
Well, I think, what can we do to plan ahead on that? First, I don't know how much money, I don't know what our needs are in the summertime that we need to preserve. 5, 10 units, something of that sort.
I don't know if it's actually our needs. I mean, it's the federal government's need.
Right.
For TSA.
Right.
But
Well,
it's also-
maybe they could fund it.
the things like Wiggins, who does the freight service for FedEx and UPS, hire rooms for their pilots to use during the day over there,
Oh, they do?
Yeah. which we
NetJets
just
is
found
a
out
pretty
today.
decent user too.
Again, not the airport's issue though. I mean, that's a.
It's not the airport's issue, except what busy airport doesn't have a hotel very close to it? And I have to pursue this, and I asked Matt Lowell, but my question of him was, is there any zoning around here that permits hotels? And he couldn't answer me. I want to verify what my understanding is before I say it publicly. But I think, I will say that I think it would be very hard to, given present zoning, be very hard to find a place for a hotel within a mile. So,
Even on our own property?
well, it's not zoned for it.
Right.
We'd have to get the zoning
You have
changed.
to get the zoning changed.
Do we need a subcommittee meeting to flesh that out, or?
Well, I think, let me.
This
do you
presents a
wanna-
lot of interesting questions.
It does. Do you,
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts, and then maybe we go that direction. But for one, I think in terms of a buy-in, it would take a lot to convince me that that would be the best interest of the airport. I feel like we were already going down a route with the crew quarters development, and one of the highest burdens and value of cost of building on Nantucket is the land cost. So we already have that other land. We have the FAA somewhat support in that. We've been down that. So I think if we were looking at, say, let's just use a number arbitrarily of $5 million buy in there versus $5 million over to our own crew quarters, I would have to be more supportive that would be a better use of our funds. And subject to more information or an exact number, but my mind is really that we own that land and that would be brand new units and we would control it solely under the airport. It somewhat seems a better idea. In terms of the town's purchase and where the airport's position would be on that, I think we could possibly hold this over and have further discussion at a following meeting, which would still be before town meeting. But my thinking as an airport commissioner is that the the airport would best be served if that remained a hotel and not put in now. Again, it's free market and anyone can do whatever they're going to do with it. But instead of us perhaps supporting into affordable housing, perhaps our position would be not a change of use. And I think about people getting stuck, the fog, the wind, the pilots, all these reasons, and the fact that we have a hotel across the street, walking distance is a real asset. And I would like to see that remain to the extent that we can influence that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the interesting thing that I found in the tour today was because it's broken up into various buildings, there may be a possibility of keeping it as a scaled down hotel as a portion of it, and the other gets other different uses, and maybe that gets concessioned out or whatever. I don't know, but I think it's a large hotel for its location. Although their business apparently is doing very well, the hotel businesses, but the manager today made an interesting comment. He said, a lot of folks think that our services here are just for our guests. And that's why their restaurant wasn't, doing a lot of business. They converted them into a breakfast type operation. So
The one distinction with our crew quarters development, which we're calling it the Novadear Farm Development, I think, is it's not for crews, it's emergency.
right.
yes, not flight crews. Emergency
Right,
crews.
Yeah.
emergency.
And again, a different type of housing, more of a single family. Not that there couldn't be some of that. There were two buildings in the back of the property that were dormitories and housed, I believe, 16 people in each. 3 or 4 bedrooms in each one, I think, or something.
They're all mostly double rooms, 8 bedrooms in each one, mostly doubles. Some
Yeah,
people
and
just leave them for the winter and come back. But
It's a multifaceted facility, though. It's pretty
It's an
interesting.
indoor pool, and you know that there's an indoor pool,
Unaware of this,
there's
Ben?
an outdoor pool.
Indoor, outdoor,
There's a
tennis
gym, there's
courts,
a billiard room, there's 2 bars.
ballroom. It's got a lot of space. And it was in pretty
Well,
good shape, too.
It's also, was under the impression it was one of the less expensive rooming establishments for rooms, but I was disabused of that during a tour today when I asked what the rack rates were for some.
That's actually fairly reasonable for
Well, I
hotels.
know, but it's up there with B&Bs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, even if the town bought it, it would seem to me, at least a year, 2 years before that would be.
Well, first of all, it's not going to be available until after the 2020 season.
So we've got time to think about this. How many
Well,
years?
No, we don't, because the town is going to, will be probably
warrant.
on the warrant for the town meeting. If it, I can't believe they're gonna be too far down the road in terms of having a plan for it by town meeting. But if we want to get if the town is going to buy it and we want to get our ore in the water, I think we need to do that sooner rather than later. But I think, again, I would separate it into two issues. And my own feeling is I tend to agree with Arthur that from the airport standpoint, it really is not a particularly great idea.
Right. No, I think you make a good point.
So I will somehow figure out if the commission wants to take a different approach. I will somehow figure out my path on this, but I'm not going to support it. I don't think. I haven't heard anything yet that leads me to want to support the town's purchasing.
It wouldn't hurt to learn more about the possibility of preserving an interest there in a small space. Obviously, we probably won't commit any funds to that, but I don't know if TSA has any money for their own summertime help. Or,
Yeah, unfortunately, their money is, we know how their money goes. You saw the
Yeah.
shutdown. So.
Right.
It's here today and gone tomorrow.
Well, I'm happy to have these on the agenda next time if that's what everybody would like. To sort of think about it and gather whatever additional information
Yeah.
we can.
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Anything else on that? Next was the Nantucket Memorial Aviation or Aviators Wall, the Pioneers Wall. We're converting that to the Aviators Wall. The plaques have been taken down. The wall's being prepared. We're standardizing the wood and the plaques, or the wood and the plaques. The plaques weren't very legible, so we're cleaning up all the existing and we're making room for the two new individuals as well. And as soon as we have that, we'll let everybody know so we can have a little ceremony there. The MassDOT ASMP grants, the seasonal hold room is still pending. We're awaiting the contract information from the state, but the taxiway echo emergency repairs is on there, and I believe that, does that require a vote, Dan? I think it does.
Yes, I believe it, to accept the grant. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Although usually we have it, and have we gotten the documentation?
Yes, we have all the documents from MassDOT. Right? Taxiway echo, yes.
Then I will entertain a motion to accept the taxiway echo emergency repair grant from MassDOT for $8,000.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay. We'll deal with the other thing when we get to your report, Tom. All right.
Okay. On the second quarter finance update, I presented that to the Board of Selectmen last week. The revenues were up about 1.9 million, primarily driven by fuel price and gallons sold, but also $178,000 increase in rentals and fair market value. I just want to note something there. There was a one-time $259,000 reimbursement in other revenue, and that was for the bag belt that we didn't anticipate and would most likely be reclassified at a later date. The expenses were up $1 million, also again driven primarily by fuel. Net earnings before retained earnings are transferred.
Why, excuse me, Tom, why was the budget so high on the expense side, including, a $5 million difference, $5.5 million difference there is pretty significant.
Different from where I'm.
From the fiscal year 19 budget to the fiscal year 19 actual.
because it's only 6 months.
Yeah, it's a full
Oh,
year.
okay,
It's a full
I'm
year.
sorry. Yes, good catch. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking at two of them.
Yeah,
Yes,
That
okay.
we've asked that they eliminate that.
good question and good answer.
So after, or before you put the retained earnings in, the net earnings are up about 900,000. After retained earnings are transferred out, it's about 211,000 for net earnings of about 1.1. You do all the ins and outs and puts and takes, and we're about 600 and some thousand better than last year. With a added to the retained earnings balance of 2.1 gives us a fund balance of about 4.2 million.
Do we
In the fund.
still estimate transferring over the $400,000 from the PFC reserve? That will happen. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions on the second quarter update?
Pretty good numbers, really.
We're getting there.
No, I think that's huge.
And it's,
Improvement.
again, a lot, we're trying to diversify the revenue, and I give Jamie a lot of credit. As I said, this next budget is the first time we're not relying on retained earnings to balance the budget.
Yeah.
However, that being said, what we are doing is we're transferring from various funds, and that's the next item on the list here. So we're proposing for ATM, and there's a handout that has the green lines here. It's an updated version. Transferring funds. The first one is a stabilization fund. And I'm going to ask Jamie to correct me if I'm wrong here, but the rule of thumb that was given to us was anticipate your maximum exposure and set aside 50% of that. So Jamie has calculated it, and you're transferring funds into the stabilization fund. The next is the fuel revolver transfer, and that will be to fund some of the repairs. We're going to look at 300,000 from the fuel revolver and another 300, I believe, from retained earnings. Next is the next column. I'm sorry, you have to, after that stabilization still. The next big group, though, are where we're using retained earnings to pay our share of the costs associated with projects to close them out, so that we're not taking anything long-term. And we can close out the projects and not increase our debt service. The next group is to help us manage cash flow and pay for those projects. Then we have the next is for our housing, $200,000, and that's the additional funds we'll need. We already have some money appropriated, but that's what we'll need for the site plan and the plan development. And then the last two, we're asking the commission's approval as is, but we anticipate receiving grant fundings for these and eventually reducing or eliminating them. But this is our maximum exposure so that we can then do these transfers and not have to incur any additional debt through a borrowing, and just use our money to float it. And then once we get the grants in, we'll pay those down. Is that correct? So it's a significant amount of money being transferred. The good news is we have the money to transfer. And again, I think it's great financial management on Jamie's part of keeping our debt service from growing.
In the old days, these would have already been funded by long-term debt.
Right, and the money would have just kept going in. So, and I forgot, but there's a second page that details the stabilization fund transfers and how the number was obtained.
As you will recall, the stabilization fund was set up to provide a backstop for when people retired and received large payouts of vacation, sick days, and so forth.
Yeah, that was hitting our operating directly, and it was essentially unplanned for and had a significant hit on our operating. So with the stabilization fund, it softens that quite a bit.
I appreciate this strategic,
Thinking and planning, yeah, it's just keeps us going.
All right, any questions on transfers? Do we need a motion to approve those?
I believe so, yeah, because that's going to be a warrant article.
I make a motion to approve the budget transfers listed on the handout.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Say the month comes in, before anyone told me, and I haven't given them the final numbers. I got weird.
Yeah, you better get up to the microphone if you're asking something as complicated as this. Sorry.
But she's asking to reduce it if we get the
I
funding.
know what she's asking, but it's a good message, actually.
So with the last two on the list, I just want to make sure that I have the commission's permission to lower those numbers before the final annual town meeting numbers have to go in if we've received any more grant money.
You want a motion to that effect as well?
I don't.
I think if you
Let's
accept
amend
this
the
as
first
is,
motion to say, subject to the receipt of any grant money applicable against these projects.
That'd be helpful, just so.
Okay. All right, did you get that?
So,
Thank you. All right. Fuel revolver cap discussion?
there's two items essentially here. One is the actual cap number. You may recall we increased it to 5.2, and we're being asked for the number for next year, which is kind of difficult since we're about 18 months away almost, and not knowing what the economy is going to do, what the fuel prices are going to do. Our recommendation is going to keep it at 5.2. If in fact we have to reduce it, it would have to go to a town meeting, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a special town meeting if we had to. The other thing was that Jamie brought up a concern if we're going to be changing the language to allow us to use fuel revolver funds to do maintenance repairs to the farm, we may have to increase the cap, and that would have a significant negative impact on the operating, the money flowing over to operating. But I believe she's got a resolution to that, so that shouldn't be an issue. I just wanted to make the commission aware of that. We will be using funds to do the upgrades, or not even upgrades, rehabilitation of the farm. So our recommendation is to keep
Well,
it at
isn't it a
5.2.
wash basically on one side or the other? It's not an expense for the,
It is, it's just a matter of, and I'm sorry, I think we discussed this, whether it's in your budget or whether it's a transfer.
right.
So for budgeting purposes, we're recommending a cap of 5.2 million, and we will transfer money accordingly to do the repairs.
Will the repairs be in the budget, in the expense budget?
This last minute capital project that we are transferring.
That's the one in the green on the,
Oh, right, okay,
So
yeah.
that's how we're gonna fund it.
Good. Okay.
So that way it won't have anything to do with fuel revolver.
the cap.
With cash flow.
But
We're doing a transfer from the fuel revolver.
But the transfer from retained earnings is to the fuel revolver or to the
No, this is to the
airport's budget?
fuel fund taking capital project.
Of
So
course.
we're doing the capital account. The fund, and that's where the
Okay.
expenses.
All right. But I thought we were gonna pay these expenses out of the
The revolve,
revolver.
yes. Well, that's one of them. There's one from retained earnings and one from fuel revolver. Both are 300,000. See the two green lines?
You got it, yeah, okay. Well, you're going to have to explain to me sometime why this is. I don't understand why then we're paying it. We're talking about paying it all from the fuel revolver. But we can talk about that offline, you and I, sometime. Unless everybody else wants to be part of the discussion. I don't hear great eagerness on people's part.
I'd rather do it offline.
All right,
No, Jamie does a great job explaining stuff one to one.
right.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Rafter, your report, please.
As you may have heard, we had a pipe break in Jamie's office, flooding her office, part of the hallway, and some of the offices next door. The drying has taken place. They removed all the damaged areas, roofing, flooring, some carpet. We have an insurance claim filed. The appraiser was in, and now we're working with McFarland Johnson to develop the specifications to go out to bid to get the repairs completed. In the interim, Jamie's working out of she has a nice new big office in the conference room. But it was very disruptive, and she soldiered through, so I give her credit.
Who did the demo on that?
ServPro.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they
So that was
actually-
you called it insurance and they showed up?
Well, yeah, it was, they recommended another company was off island and couldn't get there for a few days, and this was something that had to get done quickly. So they did approve them. On the seasonal preparations, Hold Room 2 has multiple bids that are out, and I'll go through that when I get to the RFPs. Staff has constructed gates and counters for the new hold room. Aircraft parking positions are being coordinated with the airlines. Our management staff schedule has changed. We will have coverage for 11 weekends over the summer with myself, Noah, or Dave. We previously met with TSA to identify and address their concerns, and we're pursuing a post-screening opportunity in the tent, which is also a bar. We provided a term sheet to the existing concessionaire. We got authorization or approval from the licensing department from town that said they could extend it as part of their existing operation.
And the police department approved it.
Yes, the police and licensing. The ALP update and geometry issue, we're still awaiting feedback from FAA. The EIS and EA work is beginning. Tank compliance services are fuel farm compliance and removal of underground storage for the tower generator. We're formulating a plan for that. PFC application work is beginning for our second application of gathering data. On the housing project, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but what I forgot to mention was Jamie came up with a great idea for the financial analysis portion of it. We reached out to McFarland Johnson and asked them to come up with a couple of different scenarios, as well as develop a model that we can use in the future, that as we get actual or closer good estimates, we can plug it in and develop a risk analysis to see what the financial numbers shake out to be to the authority or to the commission. So I think that's a very good idea, and we're going to proceed with that. Pavement marking and rubber removal, bids are being developed. Bunker Road drainage issue. We've had a serious drainage issue on Bunker Road by the electric company. The engineers were out to look at it. They've come up with some short-term recommendations, and they're going to look at a long-term, probably replacement of the infiltrator system that is out there, and we'll be putting that in subsequent capital project. The fuel farm rehabilitation that we discussed earlier will be done in 2 phases. The first phase will be testing the pipes and suppression system, and then phase 2 will be determined based on the work that is performed in phase 1. We are getting initial indications that we may not have to replace all of the piping. There's another mechanism that can be used. That's the good news. The bad news is on the other side, the fire suppression may cost more because there's more work to be done there. So we'll have to see when we get the final estimates on that. On the RFP and bid update, I will say Katie was very organized before she went out, and Lil has picked it up and run with it, thank God. The on-call electrical service bids were received and we're proceeding with award. Fuel farm inspections, we received one bid. We had to reject that and we're reissuing the bid. On-call HVAC, one bid was received and we're proceeding with the award of that. IT services, the bids are due in on the 14th. Fuel supply bids are out and due March 8th. The seasonal hold room, as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 bids out on the street. They're doing tomorrow. It was supposed to be today. We postponed it one day. That's for the fence, the tent, and the floor. And then the electrical will be subsequently advertised for bid. On the operations side of the house, the certification inspection from FAA is scheduled for May 22nd through 24th. We were initially concerned about a second federal government shutdown, but we're hearing that hopefully there's a resolution to that. Drones have become a big issue in airport operations, for good and bad. Good side, trying to utilize drones in the operation to perform functions that, self-inspection and other such duties. The more critical issue, as you probably have read, Newark Airport has experienced at Gatwick and Heathrow in London, and it has a very significant disruption to the operation. More importantly is there's a lot of questions out there about who's responsible, who can do what, and how can it be done. The FAA is working on a concept of operations that they'll be issuing to airports and give some guidance as to what plans and what things we have to do in terms of notifications. It's a unique subject, but we're very, very limited on any interdiction. However, there are some approved detection mechanisms, methods out there and equipment. So we're working closely. Preston's working on that because Preston also has his drone license as well. We are moving through the hangar waitlist process and the implementation of the new rates and charges as well for the airlines.
Can you make a prediction as to whether the T hangars will be full by the time we get through
They're
with this?
full. March 1st, they'll be full. We've had 3 people apply, accept. So, any questions before I go into statistics? Okay. Operations are down significantly again, 51.5% over last December, down year to date 25.3%. General aviation operations for January were up 38%. The enplanements were down 16.17 over last December, but year to date up 6%. And Cape Air saw a 5% decrease in enplanements. Nantucket Air down 43%, Tradewinds down 12%, and Retrix down 15%. The only silver lining is that when we talk percentages on this time of year in December, it's not real significant numbers. In the Boston market, Cape Air experienced a 9% decrease. New Bedford traffic, though, continued to increase and was up 3%, or 7 passengers. So, Cape Air's White Plains traffic had 3 enplanements versus 8 last December. The Hyannis market for December was down 28%, or 448 passengers in total, with Cape Air down 14 passengers, Nantucket Air down 340 passengers, and Retrix down 122 passengers. JFK market, Cape Air carried 130 passengers with a load factor of 53%, which is up over last month. So that's, apparently growing. That's
And
a good sign.
they presumably have a passenger or 2 from Hyannis, do they? Do we know?
It originates in Hyannis.
Right.
So yeah, we've heard that some people are using it, beginning in Hyannis. And for LaGuardia, Retrix only carried 1 passenger on 3 flights.
Oof.
So that's not performing very well. Vineyard traffic continued to decline and was down 87%, or 109 passengers.
Are there any flights?
Pardon me?
Are there any flights to Vineyard?
Yes,
it's
but
one a
I'm not
day.
sure that the timing is
Yeah.
conducive.
In December, there were 4 flights.
Yeah, you need to look at the timing of it when they get there.
Right, I know. So,
On the fuel side of the house, Jet A gallons sold for December were down 16.5%, or 4,626 gallons. Year to date, they're up 10.3%. And for January, they're up 36, almost 37%, or 2,127 gallons. Avgas is continuing to climb, was up almost 51% for December and year to date 14.2%.
Why does that make sense? Because of the slow decrease in operations. It just doesn't, it's very counterintuitive.
I think what it is Cape Air is buying more fuel here. And sometimes it's inconvenient in Boston for them to get their own fuel. So for January, it was up 67% or 2,006 gallons. So I can't explain it, but we'll take it.
Right, exactly.
Freight for December was up almost 16%, 15.7 over last December, and up 3.9, almost 4% year to date, with UPS showing a very significant increase in their market share. And noise complaints, there were 2 in December versus none last December, and detailed report, I believe they're both flying inside the noise abatement cars. Any questions before I go on to personnel? Personnel report, if you haven't heard, Katie had her baby, healthy baby boy, and she and the baby are doing very well. We also hired a replacement in our customer service representative in the FBO. Her name is Helena Hubova, and she began work the other day. And I have one request. I apologize, I don't know if it was on the agenda, but a request. Each year I ask the commission to approve the.
It's under the commissioner's comments.
Okay. You want to?
I'll take care of it.
Okay. That's my report.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Rafter? Commissioner's comments, please. Anybody? All right, I've got several things, actually. The letter Mr. Rafter was referring to was for a position to support him in his quest for and that's the words used in the letter, for an at-large position of Secretary Treasurer of AAAE. And he has asked if we would consider supporting him and writing a letter for him.
Make a motion to issue the letter as drafted.
Anybody want to see it?
There's a handout.
Oh, you have it all. Oh, this says handout, so I can't sign this one. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. The second thing is I wanted to just note that it took them a while to get their act together, but the Community Foundation for Nantucket was prepared to make a substantial contribution to the food pantry. And it's the name of it escapes me. It's Interfaith Council that runs the food pantry, the fuel assistance fund, and so forth, in support of the controllers, the TSA, and the Coast Guard. It didn't happen because by the time they did get their act together, they went, and that shutdown had ended. It was after, so they were told it wasn't needed. They're prepared to do it again if there's a second shutdown.
It's good news.
And I just wanted to report that. The final thing that I am compelled to mention is, as Mr. Rafter mentioned tonight, and to be very honest, I can't remember whether we've discussed it at the commission meetings. I know he and I have discussed it so many times that it seems like second nature. The idea of putting a bar cart basically out in the hold room. It was discussed, I believe it was discussed at the time we were renewing the lease for the restaurant as a possibility. I don't know that we ever took a vote on it. Mrs. Topham is very upset. Commissioner Topham is very upset about it. She mentioned it at the tenants meeting that she was opposed to it. She sent Mr. Rafter an email this afternoon that she was opposed to it. So I'm going to ask Mr. Rafter to describe a little bit what's involved. He mentioned it before, but I think it's well to have it put together here and then ask the commission if it wants to take any action on this
and I apologize, I should have had the drawing, I'll have it for next meeting, but the hold room phase 2, if you will, is going to be much larger than last year. Last year was a single small tent. This year it will be 2 tents, and the sizes are, I'm looking at Noah because he knows this, 20 by 40 and 40 by 40.
How big is
One
the
will
current
be-
hold room, do you know?
One is essentially assigned for JetBlue, and the other is assigned for American, and that's where the switching of the gates comes into play, and where Noah's been negotiating with the airlines. It is designed, I believe, to hold 125 people between the two, is it? Or what was the number? Roughly. And from feedback that we heard from the airlines and others, a number of things were said that there wasn't enough room, it wasn't used properly, and they admitted not using it properly, so we're working with them on using it accordingly. But also in looking to try to have some attractions and services. If you're going to put 125 people outside, that we should have something, some level of service. And we've always wanted to get a post-concession, or post-screening concession anyway. So the idea was to put in a bar. We may even put in a TV out there. The architects came up with the idea of having some high top tables, some benches in a nice row, and having it organized better. And I have to give our maintenance guys credit too. They did a fabulous job creating the new counters and new gates. So I will have a drawing for you the next meeting that shows the layout. This is a much more substantial tent, if you will, than we had last year. It will have an elevated floor because we had some puddling last year, so it'll be up about 3 inches or so. We'll have all the electrical drops, the data drops for the computers, for the airlines, and a whole new fenced-in area and doors and things like that, or gates. So
Are there seats in this whole room?
there will be, and again, that's the layout from the architects. There'll be benches, but they'll be laid out accordingly so that there'll be sections where you'll have them in alignment and everything, along with a queue area for the gate podiums that will be out there. The reason we're doing this is, as I think I mentioned before, JetBlue will be up to 10 flights a day on peak days. And the reason we're switching our staffing schedule around everything else is on peak Saturdays, we will have 20 flights a day, not including Cape Air and Retrix. That's just the seasonal carriers. And that's a lot of movement. So we're going to have a presence there peak time. I also informed the maintenance superintendent that I want a full-time maintenance individual there on Saturdays and Sundays in the summer as well. In case any bag belt, failures or anything else, we can't afford to have a blip in the system. So again, it's a service to the customer. We set out a term sheet to the existing operator, very detailed as to what we want to see there and how it will be done. Compostable cups, different color cups between, if it has alcohol, if it's a soft drink, how they will handle the trash, the rent. All these things were identified in about a 3-page term sheet that we've provided to them. We're going to be discussing later this week.
What kind of revenue do you get for us is involved here? Anything? It sounds like we're creating a potential problem. I'm just wondering if we're going to be worth it.
It's
To do all this work.
the term sheet has identified $35,000, I think it was, and that's what's in the current term sheet. I think it has potential to do much greater in the future.
Am I not correct in saying that if that's sort of the limit on what we can get from it?
Mhm.
If we want more, we have to put it out to bids.
Well, it will have to go out to bid next year, and I made that clear.
But there won't be a $35,000 ceiling.
Correct.
So who would operate this? I mean, is Crosswinds interested?
Crosswinds, that's who we're meeting with, yes, and that's the licensing department said the police department has approved or agreed that they can use that as an extension of their existing license.
They're interested in that?
We gave them the term sheet. They were interested in the concept for sure.
Yeah.
We're going to see what their feedback is on the term sheet, and if they don't like the terms or we can't come to an agreeable set of terms, then we may look elsewhere and see if we can find another suitor.
Do you want to discuss the nature of our absent commissioner's projections to this?
I don't know the nature of her, I mean,
I was not at the tenant meeting. I don't know if she, expanded on it. The only thing I saw today was an email that she was not against having alcohol in the concession beyond the screening.
she was against it.
She was against,
That's all it said.
Well, I can see things could possibly get out of hand there, but
No, except every airport,
has that.
has
I
that.
do.
And if I may, Commissioner, there was a concern issue expressed by the police department. And as I explained to them, I said, you're dealing with a group of individuals that have been fully screened, so there are no weapons. You have an armed officer in there, the only guy with the gun. And
And they can't leave the premises.
and they're in there for a limited period of time.
Yeah.
So it's not as though they're sitting around, pounding them back all day long for hours at a time. So it's a continuous flow of passengers that have already.
It'll be a continuous flow till we get a walks-off situation. Nevertheless,
So what is the consensus? We can either let Mr. Rafter go ahead, or we can hold this up, and obviously it's awkward because we put out the term sheet, but hold it over till the next meeting for a vote.
If I may, just with regard to the timing, Dan, my understanding from the licensing department is that Crosswinds would have to have all their things in by March in order to be able to serve by May or June because of the timeline that the town is under.
I don't have any problem moving ahead with that.
I don't have a problem with it for the one, it's only 1 year, so it's a trial.
That's basically-
You just sort of answered the question that I had and reassured me. I mean, I was pretty sure, but the fact that there's an armed officer on that side, in that constrained area, if anything, it's probably a problem when they get on board where they're going.
Well, and again,
We're just
So
offloading
I
our
think
own
you're right,
problem.
not to be facetious, but I think that the concern could happen when all of a sudden, flights are delayed for long periods of time and people are occupying themselves.
That's part of the reason why myself, Noah, or Dave will be there during peak time, Saturdays and Sundays in the summer.
And when you said the term sheet is 35,000, so is that based upon sales of some sort, or is it that's the fixed fee?
It's a fixed rent. It's $7,000 a month.
Sounds good.
Mr. Planzer, do you have any objection to proceed? Let's go forward. Right, good, thank you. Public comment? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session as set forth on the agenda.
So moved not to return to open session.
Second?
All those, I guess we have to take a roll call. Mr. Muscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.